Welcome to the first episode in a Legendarium series called Greeks vs. Celts. In this episode, The Invasion of Macedonia, we will be talking about early contacts between the Greeks and the Celts, and how the wars between the successors of Alexander the Great led to a civil conflict in Macedonia that unfortunately coincided with a Celtic migration into southern Europe, and when the two cultures met, the Greeks were crushed by the Celts. Beginning in the 800s BC, the Celtic peoples began migrating out of their homeland in what is today southern Germany. Their early mastery of ironworking allowed various Celtic migrations to move across the continent and displace or conquer any existing nations. Celtic kingdoms spread from what is today the Balkan Peninsula in the east to France in the west, with their cultural influence felt in Britannia and even modern Bulgaria, forming nations like the Arverni, Celtiberi, Ba'i, and the Brigantes. Greeks and Celts first came into contact during the 500s BC, when the Greeks began founding colonies throughout the western Mediterranean. The Greek colony of Macedonia in modern France allowed contact between the two cultures. According to tradition, the city of Macedonia itself was founded by a marriage between a Greek named Protus and the daughter of the Ligurian chief Gyptus. The Greeks considered the Celts to be the most populous nation in the world and even included them in Greek mythology after making contact, with some Greeks believing that Hercules sired the Celtic nation during his journeys to the north, and other Greeks believing the Celts to be the descendants of the Cyclops Polyphemus. For generations, Macedonia became a trade center between Celts and Greeks. However, during the wars between Thebes and Sparta during the 360s, Celt mercenaries fought for Dionysius of Sicily, an ally of Sparta. Reportedly, the Celts fought as horsemen and slew many enemies. Celts and Greeks met in battle again during the reign of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian who conquered Greece and would later spread Greek culture across the world. Alexander the Great campaigned in southern Europe to shore up his northern frontier before invading the Persian Empire. The Celts were forced to come to terms and give up hostages, a sign of abject surrender. Some Celts probably fought in Alexander the Great's army during his march to India. However, the balance of power changed greatly after the death of Alexander the Great and the collapse of his empire. It divided among Alexander's leading men, called the Diadochi, or successors. For 40 years, the Diadochi fought bitter wars among themselves to decide who would rule what remained of Alexander's world-spanning empire. None of them would prove to be strong enough to reunite the empire Alexander created. However, one of the most successful was Lysimachus, who governed the frontier region of Thrace. After years of war, Lysimachus created a strong and stable kingdom, extending his control over much of Macedonia and parts of northern Greece. By 285 BC, Lysimachus was nearing 80 years of age, a stunning life for the time. And while Lysimachus had a son named Agathocles, a legendary fighter in his own right, who served with his father in battles from the Danube to Asia Minor, Lysimachus, for reasons unknown to us, kept putting off the day that he named Agathocles his successor. This led to a crisis, as Lysimachus had taken multiple wives who bore him children, among them Arsinoe, the daughter of Lysimachus's fellow successor in Egypt, Ptolemy I. One of Arsinoe's sons, Ptolemy Serenus, meaning Ptolemy Thunderbolt, stood as a rival to Agathocles. Determined to show that he would become king, Agathocles founded his own city, Agathopolis, where he began minting coins stamped with his face while wearing the royal diadem, effectively proclaiming himself co-king with his father. Faced with a choice between declaring his son co-king or proclaiming him a traitor, Lysimachus did the latter and ordered his own son to be executed in 282 BC. A terrible uproar followed, as Lysimachus' subjects were outraged by the murder of the popular and capable Agathocles. Arsinoe and Ptolemy Soranus, fearing they would be blamed for the murder, fled to the Seleucid Empire. Its ruler, another elderly successor named Seleucus, saw a chance to take Macedonia, his homeland. Seleucus led an army north and crushed his former comrade in arms Lysimachus, who perished in battle. However, not long after, Ptolemy Soranus murdered Seleucus himself, took command of part of the army by bribing the officers, and then imposed his rule upon Greece, murdering all of his rivals for the throne, including his own half-sister. However, many of the leading men of Lysimachus' former kingdom saw Ptolemy Soranus not as the rightful king, but a vicious usurper and murderer, not worth supporting. At this dangerous moment, a nation of Illyrian Celts began migrating southwards towards Greece, forced eastward by a growing population and not enough land. While many Celts previously migrated westward, these Celts headed south and east. Word of their progress reached Soranus from the Dardanians, a Thracian nation who lived north of Macedonia. Though the Dardanians and Macedonians had been enemies for centuries, the Dardanian king offered to ally with Soranus to help him repel the Illyrian Celts. And with 20,000 fighting men at his command, the Dardanian king would have been a powerful ally indeed. However, Soranus refused the offer, considering the Dardanians to be just as uncivilized and barbaric as the Illyrian Celts. With no help coming from Soranus, the Dardanian king surrendered to the Illyrian Celts, even putting his army under their command. Bolgius, the commander of the Illyrian Celts, sent word to Soranus of Macedon, promising him peace in exchange for tribute. In an act of stunning arrogance, Soranus believed that Bolgius truly feared him and demanded the Illyrian Celts hand over hostages, a sign of abject surrender in exchange for peace. In 279 BC, Bolgius' horde confronted Soranus' army, and Soranus learned that he was no Alexander the Great. The Macedonians were crushed. Any survivors taken by the Celts were sacrificed. After being captured, the demented and arrogant Soranus had his head cut off, placed on a pole, and paraded around the Celtic camp. Flush with victory, the Illyrian Celts began moving into the Macedonian and Greek countryside. City gates were closed. Desperate prayers and sacrifices were made at temples. Despair swallowed the Greek world. However, one man rose to lead the Macedonians and Greeks into battle again, Sosthenes of Macedon, and we'll see how he did in the next episode. That wraps things up for this installation of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. I hope you have a great day, and thanks again for joining me.